All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to uncover the architectural secrets behind building a truly decoupled OIC monitoring dashboard using Oracle Apex. Now, if you've ever tangled with Oracle Fusion implementations, you already know that Oracle Integration Cloud, or OIC, is basically the critical infrastructure running everything behind the scenes. So today, we're unpacking a really fascinating technical case study that solves a massive headache. How do you give your business operations teams visibility into those integrations without completely breaking your architecture or, just handing over the keys to the kingdom?
So, this whole framework we're looking at today comes straight from the solution architecture team over at Biz Insight Consulting. And honestly, it's a real game changer for how operations teams view integration health. Instead of treating system monitoring as just some mundane IT chore, they've engineered a highly structured, strategic approach that beautifully bridges the gap between those super complex backend systems and your everyday business operations. Listen to this quote from the source material. It really hits the nail on the head. On a good day, that loop took 20 minutes. On a bad morning, it took longer. We've all been there, right? Picture this. A crucial overnight inventory sync just completely fails. The operations team only notices because something downstream breaks, like a hold on order fulfillment. So they fire off an email to IT. Then they just have to sit around while IT manually checks the OIC console. Waiting on that manual check causes a massive ripple effect of delays for purchasing and fulfillment. On a bad morning, before IT is even awake and at their desks, the business is literally flying blind. And here's where the friction really starts. The native OIC console is for sure a developer's dream. It's packed with execution logs, payload inspection, deep fault details, the whole shebang. But for an operations manager, it's a total nightmare. They don't need to dig through a JSON payload. They just need to know in plain English if the scheduled integrations worked or if they need to escalate a specific failure to the dev team. Okay, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, the OIC monitoring dilemma. Second, the three-layer architecture. Third, the scheduled backend data flow. Fourth, tokens and upsert logic. And finally, number 5, proactive operations. Let's start with section 1, the OIC monitoring dilemma. This step-by-step failure chain highlights the real pain of flying blind. It's what we call the reactive loop. Notice an issue, email IT, wait for them to check OIC, then finally decide if it needs escalating. In this loop, ops teams can only react to failures way after they've already impacted the business. A report is late, records are missing, and only then does the alarm sound. This matters immensely because it basically turns IT into a huge bottleneck and forces the business to be entirely reactionary. Moving right along to section 2, the three-layer architecture. To break that reactive cycle, the architecture team introduced this robust, decoupled three-layer pattern. It cleanly separates out the responsibilities. You've got Oracle Apex 24.2 handling just the presentation layer, the user interface. Then, the autonomous data warehouse handles the data layer, acting as your persistent storage and log cache. And finally, the integration layer is OIC itself, handling the scheduled and app-driven REST flows. By strictly separating these out, the architecture stays incredibly stable and lightning fast for the user. Now, here is the golden rule of this entire build. Nothing, and I mean nothing, in the Apex UI calls OIC directly at runtime. Think of it like a firewall. The UI relies entirely on a fast, stable database layer instead of making live API calls that have variable latency. Because let's be real, if a monitoring dashboard takes 8 seconds to load just because it's fetching live APIs, people are simply going to stop using it. Decoupling the UI guarantees instant load times every single time. Okay, section 3, scheduled backend data flow. So, how does the data actually get from OIC to Apex? It's all about backend persistence, happening entirely in the background. Every 10 minutes, like clockwork, DBMS_scheduler fires off. It triggers a PL SQL package that hits the OIC API, pulls the latest run data, parses the JSON response, and stores it directly into a dedicated UI table. So by the time the operations manager opens their Apex dashboard, the data is already sitting there waiting for them. Now, you might be wondering, why use DBMS_scheduler for this? Apex has its own pretty great built-in automations, right? So why push the job all the way down to the database level? 2 words: absolute reliability. For a morning dashboard to be truly business critical, that data load has to happen regardless of what the application is doing. Because DBMS scheduler runs at the database layer, it guarantees that the monitoring data stays fresh, even at 3 a.m. when absolutely 0 users are logged into Apex. Let's get a bit more technical in section 4, tokens and upsert logic.
The first piece of heavy lifting here is token management. Calling the OIC API means you need a bearer token from Oracle IDCS. But requesting a new token every 10 minutes, that's a massive performance killer. So instead, the system uses token caching. It stores the token in a configuration table. Since OIC tokens are good for about 7 days, it only regenerates once a week. They even threw in a smart 1-hour buffer to avoid that awkward edge case where a token expires right in the middle of a data fetch. It's incredibly optimized. Next is the actual upsert logic. This is brilliant because it smoothly handles integrations that are mid-flight between those 10-minute cycles. The package essentially loops through the incoming OIC instances. If an instance ID already exists in the table, it just updates the mutable fields, like switching the status from running to completed. If it doesn't exist, it just inserts a new record. Just look at the comparison here to see why this matters. If you used a naive delete and reload pattern, you'd literally lose in progress records. Say an integration started at 2 a.m. and finished at 2:05 a.m., a delete and reload might miss that completely, creating a massive blind spot. The upsert pattern ensures the history is perfectly preserved without dropping a single state change.
And as a developer, you're going to appreciate these little technical gotchas they had to navigate, like wrapping to-number around JSON_value because Oracle's JSON function doesn't play nice with dot-size path expressions for arrays, or using CHR38 instead of an actual ampersand because the literal ampersand in a PLSQL URL string will totally break SQL Workshop. They also process and format timestamps from raw milliseconds into clean hours and minutes at load time, not query time. That little trick keeps the Apex UI unbelievably fast.
Finally, Section 5, proactive operations. Let's bring this all back to the business reality and see the impact. The before state was entirely reactive, waiting on IT, discovering symptoms way downstream. But the after? It's a complete 180. With this command center, ops teams just check the Apex dashboard as part of their morning routine. It empowers them to spot overnight failures before anyone downstream feels the pain, shifting IT support from a reactive panic to a proactive workflow. This dashboard delivers serious, plain language value right there on page 4 of their Apex app. We're talking 10-minute fresh data, pre-formatted durations, and color-coded status badges that anyone can instantly understand. Best of all, if something fails, the ops team gets the exact OIC instance ID. So when they actually do need to escalate to IT, they aren't just saying it's broken, they're handing over the exact ID IT needs to investigate the fault. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative question to chew on, which we'll explore in the next part of this series. If Apex is this incredibly powerful for monitoring, when is it actually the wrong answer for an extension? The authors make a great point that honest guidance on when not to use a tool is often way more valuable than blind advocacy. Sometimes a pure OIC solution or VB Studio might actually be the better fit. Well, thanks for joining me for this explainer today. Looking at this BizInsight consulting case study really proves that a properly decoupled architecture isn't just about writing clever PLSQL code, it's about fundamentally giving your operations team their independence and turning reactive panic into proactive control. Catch you on the next explainer.